The archaeologist screamed and collapsed as Hitler's voice echoed through the underground chamber, giving orders as if the war had never ended. His assistant rushed forward, pulse racing, only to freeze in terror as the disembodied German commands continued to issue from behind the rusting iron door they had just unsealed beneath Berlin's government district. The voice, unmistakable to anyone who had ever heard historical recordings, spoke with urgency about troop deployments and final victory, as if it were still April 1945 and the Third Reich stood at the precipice of history rather than buried beneath it. Dr. Werner Hoffmann, a respected archaeologist with 20 years of experience excavating World War II sites across Europe, had led the team that made this impossible discovery. Just moments earlier, he had been methodically documenting the previously unknown bunker complex, believed to be an extension of Hitler's Führer bunker that somehow escaped Allied detection after the war. The chamber had remained sealed for nearly 8 decades until Hoffmann's team located it during routine archaeological work preceding a new government building construction. The discovery should have been merely historically significant. Instead, it defied everything modern science understood about reality. The voice continued, crisp and unmistakable, giving detailed military commands and speaking of the Reich's imminent victory, as if trapped in a moment from 1945. Deploy the reserves to the Eastern Front immediately. The Soviet advance must be halted at all costs, the voice commanded, sending chills through everyone present. What made the discovery even more disturbing was that these were not recordings. The voice responded to questions, acknowledged the current date, yet insisted the war continued. When one terrified researcher had stammered out, "But the war ended decades ago," the voice had laughed, a sound so filled with genuine amusement and malice that 2 security personnel immediately requested transfer from the site. Hoffmann's assistant, Elena Mueller, carefully approached her collapsed mentor. His face had drained of all color, his breathing shallow and erratic. "Dr. Hoffmann?" she whispered, kneeling beside him. But the archaeologist's eyes remained fixed on the door, his body trembling violently as a thin line of blood trickled from his nose. Whatever had happened when he'd first peered through the door's viewing port had affected him physically. Later, after being sedated at Berlin's Central Hospital, Hoffmann would only repeat one phrase: "Time is wrong in there." Time ist all wrong. Deutsche Autoritäten waren immediat kontaktiert. Was schon hätte been eine straightforward archäologische Discovery, rapidiert in eine klassifizierte Government Operation. Wenige Hours, militärische Personal und Scientists von multiplen Disziplinen deszendierten auf den Site, etablieren einen Secure Perimeter, der extended für 3 Blocks in every direction. Lokale Residents wurden evakuiert unter dem Vorwand eines Gasleaks, während spezialisiertes Equipment wurde in Trohe der Nacht brachte. Energiereadings von den gesielten Chamber verfüßten die First Technical Teams. Ihre Instrumente detekteten Radiationspatterns konsistent mit beidem nuklearem Zerfall und temporaler Displacement, einem theoretischen Phänomen niemals bevor messert außerhalb Laborkonditionen. Der Förster-Team von Investigatoren zu Enter der Chamber nach der initialen Discovery emerged visibly shaken. Dr. Claudia Weber, eine historische Akustikspezialistin, stumpelte aus mit Tränen strömend down her face. "It's impossible," she kept repeating to her colleagues. "Sound doesn't. It can't. This violates every principle of physics." Her equipment, designed to analyze and trace sound patterns, had inexplicably malfunctioned when attempting to locate the source of Hitler's voice. The audio recordings she managed to capture revealed another impossibility. The voice emanated from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, as if the air itself were speaking. Even more disturbing, when played back outside the chamber, the recordings contained only static, though everyone who had been present confirmed hearing the voice with perfect clarity. But what happened next defied rational explanation even further. When Berlin University's professor of history Heinrich Bauer addressed the voice directly, asking about specific military operations from the final days of World War II, the voice not only responded with historically accurate details, but provided information about Nazi operations that had never been documented in any historical record. Names of officers, battle plans, and weapon deployments that historians had never uncovered were described in perfect detail. Details that subsequent research would confirm through previously undiscovered documents found exactly where the voice claimed they would be hidden. Check the northeastern corner of Bunker 4 beneath Tempelhof, the voice had instructed, and there investigators found waterproof containers with perfectly preserved battle plans that had remained untouched since 1945. The chamber itself presented another impossible puzzle. Though appearing to be constructed in the 1940s with appropriate materials and techniques from that era, carbon dating of the concrete and metal components indicated they were much newer, some less than 5 years old. Yet the rust, decay, and patina matched exactly what would be expected from an 8-decade-old sealed underground structure. It's as if time itself is confused here, noted Dr. Sarah Klein, the lead physicist on the investigation. The materials exist in two temporal states simultaneously. This quantum superposition of time states should have been theoretically impossible outside of subatomic particles, yet here it was manifesting in concrete and steel on a macroscopic scale. As scientists and historians documented this anomaly, 3 members of the investigation team began experiencing severe nosebleeds and disorientation after prolonged exposure to the chamber. Medical staff attending to them reported unusual brain activity, regions associated with temporal perception showing patterns typically only seen in deep meditation or certain neurological disorders. One researcher began speaking fluent German despite having no prior knowledge of the language. When questioned, she claimed to be reporting to the Führer about Allied positions, her eyes rolling back to show only whites as she recited troop movements from battles that had occurred 80 years earlier. The voice behind the door became increasingly agitated when asked about the fall of Berlin and Hitler's suicide. "Lies! All lies!" it would roar, the chamber's temperature dropping dramatically during these outbursts, frost forming on the walls despite it being summer. "The Reich stands eternal! My plans proceed even now." During one such episode, all electronic equipment within 50 meters ceased functioning simultaneously, only to restart minutes later with their internal clocks reset to May 1, 1945, the day after Hitler's reported suicide. Security camera footage from that moment shows every researcher on site momentarily flickering, their images distorting as if seen through rippling water before returning to normal, though none of the affected individuals reported noticing anything unusual. 5 days into the investigation, a specialized team attempted to open the second door beyond the chamber's entrance, the door from behind which the voice emanated. As they prepared their equipment, the voice suddenly changed tone, becoming quieter, almost conspiratorial. "You cannot understand what lies beyond," it said. "Time does not flow as you believe. I have seen the future and bent it to my will. The technology your primitive minds call nuclear is nothing compared to what we achieved in those final days. We didn't lose the war, we transcended it." These statements were followed by a precise description of each team member present, including personal details they had never shared publicly, childhood memories, secret fears, and in one case, plans for a crime not yet committed. The technician implicated immediately confessed to plotting an assassination, though he claimed he had only begun considering it after hearing the voice name him directly. The lead scientist, Dr. Erich Steiner, insisted on proceeding despite warnings from his colleagues. As the team finally breached the inner door, a blinding flash of blue light erupted from within, followed by an ear-splitting sound that witnesses described as 1,000 voices screaming in reverse. When the light faded, Dr. Steiner had vanished completely.
The other team members suffered severe radiation burns despite wearing protective equipment, and the monitoring devices recorded an impossible surge of tachyon particles, theoretical components associated with time displacement. Most disturbing was the condition of the door itself. The newly cut metal appeared to age rapidly before the team's eyes, accumulating 80 years of decay in less than 5 minutes, as if time itself were accelerating around it. Beyond the door lay not another room, but what appeared to be a vertical shaft extending both upward and downward beyond the range of their equipment's scanning capabilities. The walls of this shaft were inscribed with mathematical equations and diagrams that leading physicists would later describe as a working theory of time manipulation that makes Einstein's work look primitive. More disturbing still, these equations were written in Hitler's own handwriting, confirmed by comparison with historical documents. Interspersed among the mathematical formulas were strange symbols resembling swastikas but subtly altered, with additional angles and lines that seemed to hurt the eyes when viewed directly. 3 researchers who attempted to transcribe these symbols developed identical cataracts within 24 hours. The implications were too terrible to fully contemplate. Had the Nazi regime, in its final days, somehow discovered principles of physics unknown to modern science? Had they constructed a device that somehow preserved Hitler, not just his voice, but his consciousness, in some kind of temporal loop or alternate reality? And most disturbing of all, was he still somehow influencing our present from this impossible space? The evidence increasingly pointed toward an unthinkable conclusion, that what they had discovered was not a relic of the past, but an active bridgehead between time periods, a Nazi technology that had continued operating undetected for decades.
Chancellor Markus Scholz arrived personally to assess the situation, unprecedented move that underscored the gravity of the discovery. Upon entering the outer chamber and hearing the voice for himself, the normally composed politician staggered backward, clutching his chest. His security detail rushed him from the site as he gasped for breath, his skin ashen. Later, safely away from the bunker, he would only say, "I recognized him immediately. Not from historical recordings, but as if I had always known that voice, as if it had been speaking inside my head my entire life." The Chancellor immediately ordered the expansion of the restricted zone around the site and requested emergency consultations with NATO allies. This disturbing statement took on new significance when other visitors to the chamber reported similar sensations. Not just hearing Hitler's voice in the room, but realizing they had somehow always heard it, faintly, in the background of their thoughts. This mass psychological effect spread to nearly everyone who entered the chamber, regardless of their age, nationality, or personal history. Several previously stable investigators had to be hospitalized after attempting to carry out orders they claimed the voice had been giving me for years. One security guard with no prior history of mental illness attempted to access nuclear launch codes, believing himself to be executing a directive from high command that would cleanse Europe once and for all. During the second week of the investigation, historian Elsa Kramer made another chilling discovery. Analyzing government policies across Europe over the past 70 years, she identified subtle patterns that aligned perfectly with strategies outlined in previously classified Nazi documents, strategies the voice in the chamber continued to dictate. "It's as if something has been guiding world events from the shadows," she whispered during her report, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Small nudges here and there, across decades, following a plan laid out by—" She couldn't finish the sentence before breaking down in tears. Her comprehensive report, stretching to over 600 pages, traced immigration policies, economic decisions, and military developments that seemingly had no connection until viewed through the lens of Nazi long-term strategy documents. The report was immediately classified at the highest level, but not before Dr. Kramer added a handwritten note to the final page. "I believe we didn't discover this chamber. It allowed itself to be found. Now."
The scientific team, now working in shifts of no more than 30 minutes to minimize exposure to the chamber, constructed a specialized audio analysis system. The voice contained subsonic frequencies that directly stimulated the brain's limbic system, the part responsible for emotional responses and memory formation. More disturbingly, these frequencies carried a secondary pattern that neurolinguistic experts identified as a form of embedded command structure, similar to hypnotic suggestion but far more sophisticated. When isolated and played for test subjects who had never visited the site, these subsonic patterns induced immediate compliance with simple commands, even when the subjects reported hearing nothing at all. 3 weeks into the investigation, a pattern emerged that sent shockwaves through the highest levels of government. Every day, precisely at 4:33 in the morning, the voice would shift from German to a unique coded language, a language that, when deciphered, revealed coordinates and instructions.
Monitoring these locations revealed contemporary political and business leaders arriving exactly as predicted, conducting meetings that seemed innocent but aligned perfectly with the broader patterns Dr. Kramer had identified in her historical analysis. When confronted, these individuals had no recollection of why they had chosen those particular locations and times, describing their decisions as random or intuitive. The public remained unaware of these developments until an unauthorized leak reached journalist Thomas Weber. Before his article could be published, Weber vanished from his Berlin apartment, leaving behind only a hastily written note. "The voice has always been there. We all hear it. We all obey." History never ended. It just continued on a different path. His laptop contained video footage of the chamber, including a chilling 5-minute segment where the voice addressed him directly by name, though Weber had never visited the site. The footage showed nothing but the empty chamber, yet the voice described Weber's appearance, his daily routine, and childhood memories no one else could have known. Most disturbing was the timestamp on the video. It had been recorded 3 weeks before the chamber was discovered. As international pressure mounted for information about the discovery, strange phenomena began occurring throughout Berlin. Residents reported hearing German military commands in their dreams. Children across the city spontaneously drew the same symbol, one found etched repeatedly on the chamber walls. Most alarming, elderly citizens who had lived through World War II began reporting seeing long-dead Nazi officers walking the streets, particularly in the government district near the excavation site. Psychiatric wards filled with patients suffering from identical delusions, all claiming that the Third Reich had never fallen, but merely shifted sideways in time and would soon realign with our reality. American and Russian scientific teams were finally granted access to the chamber 6 weeks after its discovery. Their instruments detected what they termed a temporal anomaly, a localized distortion in the space-time continuum centered on the vertical shaft. According to their measurements, time within the shaft was flowing backwards, rewinding toward 1945 at an accelerating rate. This reverse flow was beginning to affect the surrounding area, explaining the increasing frequency of temporal disturbances throughout Berlin. Objects placed near the shaft would gradually transform, newer materials reverting to their raw components or taking on characteristics they would have had decades earlier. A modern digital camera left overnight emerged in the morning as a 1940s Leica, still containing film with images no one had taken. The international team made another discovery that confirmed their worst fears. Hidden within the mathematical equations on the shaft walls were coordinates for similar chambers in Argentina, Antarctica, and beneath the Mediterranean Sea, locations long rumored in conspiracy theories to be Nazi escape locations or research facilities. Preliminary satellite scans of these coordinates revealed unusual energy signatures matching those detected in Berlin. More troubling still, these signatures appeared to be strengthening in perfect synchronization, forming what quantum physicists termed a temporal resonance network. Theoretical models suggested this network could potentially create a cascading effect strong enough to shift regional or even global time flow patterns.
Attempts to neutralize or contain the anomaly proved not just unsuccessful, but catastrophic. When specialized equipment was lowered into the shaft to disrupt the energy field, the resulting backlash caused a 2-second time displacement throughout a 3-kilometer radius. During those 2 seconds, Berlin's government district temporarily reverted to its 1945 appearance, complete with bombed-out buildings and Nazi flags. 17 people died from the sudden structural changes, materializing inside walls that hadn't existed moments before. Survivors reported seeing German soldiers moving through the streets, apparently unaware of the modern buildings that flickered in and out of existence around them. One particularly disturbing account came from a tourist who claims to have briefly seen Hitler himself, standing at a window overlooking the street, making eye contact before reality snapped back to the present. The voice, meanwhile, grew stronger daily. What had initially required sensitive equipment to hear could now be perceived from 2 streets away from the excavation site. Analysis of audio recordings showed that its frequency patterns were gradually aligning with global communication networks. Television broadcasts, radio signals, and internet data transfers had begun carrying subliminal traces of the same subsonic command structures. The voice was spreading. Reports from around the world described people suddenly hearing German being spoken through electronic devices, even when the devices were powered off. A cell phone recovered from a psychiatric patient in Tokyo continuously broadcast Hitler's speeches despite having no battery installed. When disassembled, engineers discovered its components had inexplicably transformed into vacuum tubes and crystalline structures consistent with 1940s technology. Yet, it continued receiving signals no modern equipment could detect. In a desperate attempt to contain the situation, authorities constructed a specialized chamber around the site using experimental quantum isolation technology. For 3 days, this appeared to work. The voice grew fainter, the temporal disturbances lessened. Then, on the morning of the 4th day, every electronic device in Berlin simultaneously broadcast the same message in Hitler's voice. You cannot cage what exists beyond time. The 1,000-year Reich continues through each of you. You have always been mine. The message repeated for exactly 8 minutes and 45 seconds before all devices returned to normal function. Later analysis revealed that during those precise minutes, global surveillance networks detected unusual activity at every identified Nazi bunker site worldwide, a perfect synchronization that defied conventional physics. Most disturbing of all was the discovery made by Dr. Beth Helena Mueller, who had been analyzing tissue samples from individuals exposed to the chamber. Their DNA showed subtle but accelerating changes, modifications to sections controlling aggression, obedience, and racial recognition patterns. These changes appeared to be spreading beyond those directly exposed, transmitted through some unknown means to family members and close contacts. Mathematical models predicted that if the progression continued, within 6 months, the entire German population would be genetically altered. It's like a virus, Dr. Mueller reported, but instead of attacking cells, it rewrites them according to a specific template. When asked what template, she hesitated before answering, what humans would have become if certain Nazi genetic experiments had continued uninterrupted for several generations. At this point, the German government made the unprecedented decision to permanently evacuate a 2-kilometer zone around the site, destroying all surrounding structures and entombing the chamber beneath thousands of tons of specialized concrete. But even as construction vehicles moved in, workers reported hearing the voice through the ground, through their equipment, even through the headphones playing loud music they used to try to drown it out. More alarming were the changes observed in local wildlife. Birds flying in swastika formations, rats moving in coordinated military-style groups. Plant life near the chamber began growing in unnatural patterns, forming symbols matching those found on the shaft walls when viewed from above. The final report from the International Scientific Committee, most of which remains classified, included one unredacted conclusion that continues to haunt those familiar with the case. What we have discovered beneath Berlin is not a remnant of history, but an active bridgehead, a deliberate incursion from the past into our present. Evidence suggests this technology was developed in the final days of the Third Reich, not as a weapon for the war they were losing, but for the war they planned to continue fighting across time itself. Most concerning is not that this voice from 1945 can reach our present, but that our present appears to have been shaped by its influence long before we discovered its source. Today, the site remains one of the most heavily guarded locations in Europe. Specialized equipment continuously monitors for temporal disturbances or sound anomalies. The public explanation, contamination from World War II chemical weapons, keeps curious visitors away. But occasionally, Berlin residents living near the containment zone report the same dream: a rusted iron door slowly opening, and behind it, a voice offering power and purpose to those who would listen. These dreamers often wake to find themselves standing at their windows, right arm extended in a salute they never consciously chose to give. The researchers who originally discovered the chamber have met with unusual fates. Dr. Hoffman remains institutionalized, having lost the ability to perceive time in a linear fashion. Elena Mueller vanished while traveling in Argentina, last seen near one of the coordinates found in the chamber. Most concerning is the case of security officer Hans Gruber, who was found dead in his apartment 1 year after the site was sealed, his body showing signs of having aged over 80 years in a single night, a notebook clutched in his mummified hand containing only one repeated phrase: "He is still giving orders." Perhaps most chilling was the statement given by a cleaning staff member who had briefly worked at the site before its permanent closure. "I was mopping near the outer door," she recalled, "when I heard the voice say something different, not orders, but a message. It said, 'Tell them I'm not trapped in here from their time. They're trapped out there from mine.'" The woman committed suicide 3 days later, leaving behind journal entries describing how she could see the world as it should be, overlaid on what is, the Reich victorious, the banners flying over every capital. Her final entry simply read, "Reality is thin here. It tears more each day."
Soon he won't need the chamber to reach us. Did Hitler's scientists discover a way to transcend time itself in their desperate final days? And more troublingly, how many of the thoughts we believe are our own might actually be echoes of commands issued from that underground chamber decades ago? The answers may lie buried beneath layers of concrete and secrecy, but the voice, according to classified reports, continues to speak, giving orders to soldiers who died 80 years ago and to leaders who shape our world today. Leave a comment below with what you think. Could Nazi scientists have developed technology to manipulate time? Have we all been unknowingly influenced by voices from the past? And if you found this disturbing revelation as chilling as I did, make sure to subscribe for more hidden historical horrors that continue to affect our present day.